Hello.
Here we
Hi.
are. Yeah, that was the Clement dude.
Okay. So, I'm interviewing you. So I hope you're okay with that.
Yeah,
Unless
sure.
you don't have a presentation, do you? Just to double check.
Oh, I may be able to share a few things at some point. Yeah.
If you want to, yeah, but it's
Yeah.
very flexible. Don't worry
Mm-hmm.
if you don't have anything. Okay, well, should we start by asking you? Because obviously I've given the little introduction, but it would be great to hear from you who you are, what you do, and tell us a bit about Escape Studios.
Yeah. So, well, I was listening to what you were saying just before the break and referred to the fact that VFX is a bit more relaxed and than being on set. And incidentally, I have experienced both. I started behind cameras. So I spent 11 years as a camera operator. I found myself on rather big films, not because I was particularly good, but sometimes I mean, ideally it should be merit, but sometimes just the right place and right time. So for me, it started a bit like that. Not that I knew anyone in particular. It just did the film academy in Belgium, hence the accent, and worked with a company who developed a sort of very niche, very specialized type of cameras. And we kind of got hired by big Hollywood films. And that's how I found myself on Harry Potter, like at 25 year old, something like that, kind of not really understanding how that did happen. And yeah, being on set is stressful. It's funny because so 11 years later, fast forward, I trained at Escape Studio. It was the short course at the time, not the academic curriculum. And within 3 months, I was working in the VFX industry. Really, it worked incredibly well. Yeah, I mean, basically, I finished the course, and a week later, I was just at the time working for the mill. So it went very fast. But the funny thing is that people, in VFX, obviously we're all dealing with deadlines and stuff, and they were a bit stressed. I was like, well, if you really want to know what stress is, just spend 1 minute on set and you will feel the heat, really. That is really real stress. But it's great. It's great. And I'm really super grateful for the opportunity I was given in this sort of very strange hybrid professional journey, and that kind of led to now working for higher education for Escape Studio. Escape Studio has also evolved over the last 15 years, starting really with short course to serve the industry, and at the time the sort of surge, kind of somewhat driven by production like Harry Potter. When they started turning those books into films, the production knew that, well, they probably would commit for a good 10 years of production, which is quite, unheard. And then at the same time, starting stuff like Harry Potter, they also knew that they would need overnight an army of visual effects artists, really, like quickly people trained and able to deliver very, very quickly. And that's kind of the background for Escape. So that's why it's kind of so entangled with a bit my professional journey. Um, and the irony is the first time I heard about Escape was on set, working on Harry Potter in 2004. Uh, yeah, oh my goodness, like that's so long time ago now already. And and obviously we had, like, a lot of green screen and stuff like that, and a lot of computer generated image, um and for a camera operator, that kind of stuff is really abstract. You are tasked to frame, to film something that you can't see, like a dragon flying. So you're somewhere in Scotland and you have to film like the sort of fly path of a creature which is going to come later digitally, but you can't see it, and yet you have to kind of mentally picture that thing. And that really what sparked the curiosity for me, and I started asking questions because I really knew absolutely nothing about pixels and VFX. And at the time, yeah, there were like VFX supervisor then. So those people were kind of the ambassador of VFX on set, ensuring that the people, cinematographers, camera operators, and the rest of us were doing things properly, and we were compliant with the requirement for VFX, So precisely kind of capturing this sort of invisible fly path properly. So I started chatting with that kind of people, VFX supervisor. And then one of them suggested that I should give it a go. I should join the army of VFX artists, because they were in desperate need to have a lot of people. And I didn't really, I just kept that at the back of my mind. And so that was 2004. And the guy then mentioned Escape by name, but I completely, obviously forgot about that conversation, really. I just kept working with my camera for a few years. And then eventually I was still involved in that kind of stuff and more. So probably I grew somewhat a bit frustrated with filming stuff that I could not see. And I thought, okay, I give it a go. I just got back in touch with the guy and said, well, maybe you remember I was like the part of the Belgium crew. And I said, you mentioned some sort of academy for VFX, and they said, well, yeah, they're still around. I mean, and it's called Escape Studio. And it's only then that I connected the dot. And I was like, okay, right. So in effect, that's the first time I heard about Escape Studio. It was on set, but as a camera operator. And Escape was 2 years old then. It had been created in 2002 or something like that. So I trained at Escape and left the camera behind and never really looked back, and became a compositor. And
just for anyone watching, what is a compositor?
Oh, compositor. So the best analogy I found to date, if you picture a puzzle, right, with many pieces. So people like a camera operator or a 3D artist would be in charge of shaping those pieces. And the compositors actually are the people who assemble the puzzle to such an extent that the puzzle doesn't look like a puzzle anymore, but looks like the actual thing, reality. So that's the job of compositor, is really the puzzle assembly. And 3D or camera operator for live action would generate those pieces. And all that has to come together convincingly so that the audience kind of believe it's reality. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And the irony is that with visual effects, I kind of became a better camera operator in retrospectively, weirdly. I became a better camera operator once I ceased being a camera operator and starting becoming a VFX artist. I think that tells how powerful visual effects is really in the making understanding of image at large, not just digital images, but really diving in depth in what it is to make an image, and what is an image, what it is made of, in technical terms, but also from a visual storytelling point of view. So yeah, VFX really helped me to understand all that. So I think if I were to go back on set now in capacity of camera operator, I would be a lot better than I was then.
And the VFX industry is huge in the UK, isn't it, as well? Like, it is a massive sector.
Yeah, and again, I didn't really realize that then, because on the face of it, you may think that, okay, surely that must be Hollywood and that must be West Coast, US. It isn't, and it isn't because partly because of those big machine. Again, I go back to Harry Potter, which seems a bit like my point of focus, but it's genuine. It's like suddenly we had this sort of huge engine in terms of production, and as I said, extremely visual effects hungry. And that kind of, the other factor which is often ignored is that the author, when she gave the rights, the permission to make the film, my understanding is that there was one condition, is that everything has to be made in the UK.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah.
Yes,
So
and
tick
that
that box.
completely defined the whole, direction, and really changed the face of, I think, visual effects. It's not that it didn't exist before. The film industry at large was very strong in the UK, historically, even before sort of modern digital VFX, the Star Wars, some of the Star Wars, and even Indiana Jones, like George Lucas was very, very fond of filming in the UK. There is like, again, a great tradition of filmmaking. So that was the background. But you could, I suppose that those films could have been filmed anywhere, really, anywhere else. But there was a sort of fairly unknown condition where, in fact, it had to be made here. And it had an amazing impact, really.
So those productions, like you were saying, were kind of
Mm.
the beginning of the change, the beginning
Yeah.
of the birth of the size of the VFX industry that we have in the UK now. But what about like the tools and the different techniques and stuff? Because that's something that you guys, as a VFX school, you will have a really good understanding of what the kind of emerging changes are in terms of the actual techniques and tools. So how has that changed in the last 10, 20 years?
Digital, in one word. To give you an idea, and for everyone also perhaps to have a bit of context, and I'm sure that's going to make me turn into a dinosaur instantly. The last film I worked on as a camera operator was September 2010. We were shooting in Prague for the Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, and we were shooting in film, perforated film strip, which is essentially the technology which had been used for pretty much 100 years since the beginning of filmmaking. So that technology, obviously moving from black and white to colors and stuff, had not really changed much until 2010. I mean, we're talking 15 years ago, right? So it's not that far back. And then very, very quickly, the whole thing kind of transitioned into digital. So of course, we already had visual effects, the very early, pioneering with that kind of stuff. We're talking about Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We're talking about Terminator 2. But if I'm correct, Terminator 2, you have this sort of liquid version of Terminator. And there was only 9 minutes of CG in the film. It looks longer than that because it's well edited, but it was really modest at the time. So it's interesting to look back sometimes to look at the sort of timeline, because often technological evolution, sometimes they feel very fast, but simply because a lot of the time they are brewing under the surface for some time. People are experimenting. It's just like AI and that kind of stuff. It feels like, oh wow, it's just emerging now. Well, not really. I think it's 1997. Kasparov has been defeated by Deep Blue, which IBM computer. 1997. So those things have been around for a little while. It's just that they were not necessarily so obviously available. And yeah, the transition really for the last 15 years, it's digital for motion picture, and it's a great thing. Back at the Film Academy, I had a lot of tutors there with a lot of nostalgia, and those digital was only emerging at the time. And they were very dismissive, saying, oh, it's never going to have the dynamic range of film and stuff like that. Well, fast forward, and again, it didn't take long. And film is gone mostly. I mean, you have only sporadic production. Chris Nolan shooting in IMAX film, 70 millimeter. That's luxury. It's not even better. But yeah, so it's very interesting. It's fascinating to see the evolution. But I think at the end of the day, what matters is the intent, is the intention, is the purpose. Technology without purpose is just aimless. That's so, yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think it's so interesting to hear from you how much it's changed, like you say, in like 10 years, 15 years. Like that's,
15, yeah.
yeah, that's crazy. And that gives the young people watching context as to like why you might need a school like Escape Studios who are keeping up to date with the latest stuff coming out and are making sure that they're in line with the industry protocols, industry processes, industry updates, things like that. So for the young people watching, what do they need to be super technical, or is that something that you guys can help with? And also, what kind of skills can they start learning now in order to make themselves more employable when they do, for example, come out of Escape Studios and graduate?
Yeah, so first thing, to answer that question, first thing to start with is, again, it's not all about the technique. I often kind of refer to sort of, when you look at skills broadly, but also anyone's journey and learning path, me included, like really absolutely everyone, professional journey, often that journey is made of specific, right? So the specific is the tools, the software, the technology. This is bound to obsolescence, right? So we have to be up to date, but we have to be up to date absolutely all the time, because that's the thing that's going to kind of, melt like snow in the sun. It's going to change all the time. But thankfully, again, going back to what I said earlier, it's not just about the technology. If it really was just about that, I think it would be quite depressing, frankly, because it's about the technology or the skills put to the service of again, intention and purpose, which is actually storytelling and entertainment at large. So if you kind of picture a sort of triangle which represents your learning, your cognitive journey, on one corner you have those specifics, the tools. On the opposite of that, you have universal knowledge, a type of knowledge that once known, acquired, understood, can be deployed across many platforms, across different disciplines and fields, and is de facto, time proof. It's universal. It's always going to be relevant. Simple example of that, at Escape, I'm also teaching cinematography and light, because everything we do is about, making images. And stating the obvious, if you don't have light, you can't see anything, right? So you have to understand light, whether you're an animator, a game artist, a VFX artist. If you can't control shape, direct the light, simply there's nothing to see, right? So, and light is one of those things which is completely universal. It's like gravity, because it belongs to the universe. So whether, you have a knowledge or a specific software, of course, everything is important. I'm not saying there is more or less, sort of degrees of importance. The truth is that you need to know the tools, you need to know the specifics, you need to know those very transient kind of piece of knowledge, but it's not just it doesn't stand just on its own. It articulates itself with universal knowledge, which is a lot of what we do at Escape as well. So that means that your know-how, and I think this is probably more where the universal knowledge is kind of, is still relevant kind of forever. You can still apply that, and with tools known and unknown, the tools which will emerge tomorrow, it kind of doesn't matter, because if I know how to do cinematography, if I understand light, I understand light, and that's valid for forever again. And then somewhere in between, I mentioned a sort of triangle. So you have the specifics, you have the universal knowledge, and then somewhere in between you have methods and processes. So methodology, processes, the sort of shelf life of processes is kind of, again, a bit in between. So some methods are really strongly associated with technology. So if the technology go well, some of those methods are going to disappear. But processes can also be relevant for a long time, and you can transfer those methods across other disciplines. And the benefit of methods and processes essentially prevent people from having to reinvent the wheel. So it saves a lot of time. And that's the way I would break down, sort of knowledge at large and a learning journey. And I started looking into that for myself in the first place, and before even teaching, to kind of try to understand again, not so much establishing a hierarchy, as I said, but more to identify what matters and when, managing frustration as well. Like if you were to join Escape just because you love computers and software, I would say, well, broaden your horizon a bit, because it really is not just about that. And again, if it were, that would be very, very limited, both in terms of employment, but also for the future. So our relevance, and to make us artists relevant in the future, is trying to bring those three pillars together. But the one you have to keep working on all the time are the softwares, the technique, because that's going to change very dynamically all the time.
Absolutely. And there is an Escape Studios alumni as well, isn't there? There's a kind of group where you can keep in touch with each other and also recommend certain things to each other. So you will never leave Escape Studios just being out on your own. You will have connection with other people who work in the industry, so you can keep each other in the loop with what's happening. Also, one other thing I think it is worth mentioning, obviously VFX feeds very strongly into film and TV, but it also feeds into games and also advertising. So it is a deeply transferable skill across multiple different industries. And so it is genuinely I think that's in a way a rarity, to get such a technical specific skill that is applicable across different other industries. Do you know what I mean?
True. Yeah. There's a sort of what we call convergence of skills and, again, tools. It makes a lot of sense, because at the end of the day, as I said, what we all do, essentially, we deliver pixels.
Yes, exactly.
Whether those pixels are interactive or linear in terms of consumption and storytelling, that kind of is the way I see it, is just a nuance.
Exactly. I think that's a fantastic way of describing it. Okay, right. Well, Clem, that is actually all we've got time for today. Thank you so much. It's been fascinating hearing about your journey as well as what goes on at Escape. And I feel like everyone here should be much more clued up now on how they can actually go about learning it and what they need to keep on top of if they want to. Thank you so much for joining us. I will now put you into attendee. So lovely to see you, Clem. Thank you for joining us.
Bye-bye.